News!
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that next month, on the 20th, north of the border, Canada's own Alexis Kubicki will be returning to action in a second fight, a rematch against Mexico's own Isabel Milan, a fighter with a lot more rounds in the bank, more experience than Alexis, though Alexis, she's not in unfamiliar territory. She's beaten Isabel before.
It's just a keep busy fight to kick off the year.
Just a developmental fight. You have to remember that Alexis Kubicki is actually very young, and she has under 10 fights. So any fights that she's having at this early stage in her career, it's all about development and continuing to garner professional experience, being billed for 8 rounds in the women's flyweight division. Flyweight, that's where Marlon Esparza reigns as that division's lineal, Ring Magazine, and unified champion. That's also where Gabriela Fundoria, that's where she holds the IBF title.
That's where this contest is taking place.
Alexis Kubicki sports a professional record of 8 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 9 professional bouts. I expect that the rematch between her and Isabel, it's going to go the same way the first fight did. It's going to be a one-sided beating, a one-sided shellacking. Alexis Kubicki, she's one of the better young fighters coming through in today's flyweight division. The talent pool runs deep.
At flyweight it does.
And Alexis Kubicki is plenty talented. A lot younger than Isabel Milan. Isabel, who sports a professional record of 30 wins with 11 losses, 2 draws, 9 knockouts, having been knocked out 4 times. Caught a glimpse of Isabel's first fight with Alexis Kubicki, and as stated, Alexis' speed and combinations, her angles, she was beating Isabel like a drum. Isabel, who's coming off a knockout loss to Gabriela Bouvier back in August of this year. She's coming off of 3 consecutive losses.
3
in total, and this will be the next. She's a little over 20 years older than Alexis Kubicki. Alexis Kubicki, who she fought in November of 2022.
She'll be facing her again next month.
The basic idea here being allowing Alexis Kubicki to get more rounds in the bank, more experience, while mitigating the risks, because she's still very young and it is still very early in her professional boxing career. No, I don't expect to see Alexis fighting for a full title and alphabet title until maybe 1 or 2 more years. Alexis Kubicki, who suffered a first professional loss in May of last year, but she has since rebounded off that loss with 2 fights in the same month. 2 fights back in August of last year against Mielis Altamar and Arlis Tapias. A fighter that's only 20 years old, showing this kind of ability, this kind of a ceiling, there's no need to rush them into anything. You want to use the time wisely. Use the time you have to allow that fighter to fully develop, so by the time it is time to fight for a full title, they are more than ready to do so. Because there's fighting for a title, there's being ready to fight for a title, and then there's being ready to win a title and defend a title. It's a fairly simple situation to evaluate. This young fighter's team continue to do a fantastic job of keeping her active, because activity matters. And this past year is a prime example of that. How many fighters did you see going into major fights having not fought in a year's time? This past weekend's fight, Wilder hadn't fought in over a year. Going into the Parker fight, Spence hadn't fought in over a year. Going into the Crawford fight, Fulton hadn't fought in a year. Going into the Inoue fight, believe me when I tell you, activity matters. And Alexis' team, they're doing a great job of keeping her active, keeping her busy. The more you do something, the better you become at it.
Look for this next month.
And heavyweight news, former unified champion Andy Ruiz says that he's not impressed with Anthony Joshua's win over Otto Wallin.
I'm impressed that Andy thinks anybody gives a damn what he thinks.
This lack of situational awareness from a very inactive and all but irrelevant Andy Ruiz, it really is something. In the background, Andy Ruiz Jr. was spotted laughing uncontrollably. The former unified heavyweight champion sat apathetically in his ringside seat as Joshua took care of business, although he performed well. Ruiz refused to heap a ton of praise on his muscular shoulders. It was an opponent he was supposed to beat up, Ruiz told Boxing News. Somebody that doesn't have that many skills.
That's not what people were saying before the fight.
Before the fight, Bob Arum picked Otto Verlaine to beat Anthony Joshua. Teddy Atlas did too. I think Carl Froch as well. Wonder what Andy was saying. Not aware of any fight predictions he might have made in the build-up, though let's be honest, all he's really doing is advocating for another crack at the apple, another Anthony Joshua payday in the Anthony Joshua sweepstakes, because that's what this is all about. When the WBC ordered Andy and Wilder to do a fight between them, they couldn't get it together because of the money. At least that's what the report stated.
Andy has sat out for over a year since his decision win over Ruiz Ortiz.
And I've the sneaking suspicion that if Andy Ruiz was summoned to Saudi Arabia this past weekend to be in attendance for the Day of Reckoning card, it wasn't all for leisure. At least in part, it may have been for business, that the Saudis might have one or two fights in mind they'd like to make for Andy Ruiz, and maybe, just maybe, a Joshua trilogy could be one among them. Even if it isn't a trilogy, it's not a bad idea. They're 1-1 with each other, and they both beat the other in decisive fashion. It's not like Andy's busy with anything.
I think Anthony would stop him in a third fight.
Anthony beat him easily in their rematch, in their immediate rematch all those years ago. But it wasn't enough to satisfy some people, some individuals. They would have liked to see Anthony do to Andy what Andy did to him in their initial meeting.
And I think he can.
Anthony Joshua, who said, "I said 3 fights this year, next year I might go for 4, having reaped the benefits of being a busier fighter, a more active fighter this year than he has been in previous years, all tied up with negotiations and potential fights, fighting only once a year. This was the first time in a long time that Anthony got in more than 1 fight in 1 calendar year. I'm a fighter by nature. I look at myself in the mirror and all I see is a fighter. It's just what I do, whether I'm in camp or not. I'm always ready to fight," he told Matchroom Boxing. "For me personally, inactivity is a great killer of ambition. So I made sure I'm staying active, I'm staying ambitious. The good thing about this card is that it shows you don't really need long training camps, as long as you're staying busy and staying active. So next year, I could actually get more busy. I tended to have this mindset where it was that 3-month camps are more important to get ready for fights. This came around really quickly. I said 3 fights this year, so I'm ticking that box off. Next year, I might go for 4.
That's what I told you.
Activity matters. And this Day of Reckoning card, in many ways, it was made on short notice. The fighters, they didn't get to train for as long as they usually do. And in spite of that, Anthony looked better than he's looked in years. So much so, Eddie Hearn is now calling for a Tyson Fury showdown, saying, "My God, give me Tyson Fury now, please. There is absolutely no way Tyson Fury beats Anthony Joshua. No way. Let's get behind Fury to beat Usyk, and let's get that fight made. The biggest fight of all time in the history of the sport. Commercially, a fight between Fury and Anthony Joshua might actually be bigger than an Usyk fight, even though Usyk beat Anthony. A strange mistress is the best way to describe the sweet science, this being the sweet science, what fighters sell and what fighters don't, what fighters go on to become pay-per-view attractions. It really isn't an exact science.
Because in spite of his losses and in spite of Usyk having beaten AJ, a fight with AJ and Fury is still a bigger commercial fight, bigger commercial draw than Usyk and Fury.
So do we get Fury versus AJ after those two boys settle up with each other next year? And I'm not completely sure. What if Usyk beats Fury? It was Big John Fury who said February 17th is the date they have got to work towards. In my opinion, Tyson needs a bit more time to get his conditioning right and his weight right. He is taking more punches now than he has taken in his whole career, and that could have shortened his career. That is the worry we've got here. Tyson is a remarkable man, but sometimes he needs to listen to a bit of common sense.
John Fury's been expressing concerns, just like this one, ever since the fight got made, the fight between his son and Alexander Usyk.
Didn't soon forget that he stunk out the joint with Francis Ngannou, that's not how the best heavyweight in the world, the best heavyweight in professional boxing, is supposed to look against the debutante. Even if that debutante is Francis Ngannou, I promise you, if Francis were opposite the ring, Zhilei Zhang, or perhaps Anthony Joshua, that fight don't go to distance. Francis Ngannou, he'd get knocked out.
Fury got himself knocked down.
That wasn't supposed to happen. John Fury continued, "I never said my son was in decline because he's not. It's the people around him who ain't up to much. His training is in decline, and his camp's in a bigger decline. It's not a camp, it's a circus. Oleksandr Usyk's got disciplined, professional, great people around him, and I don't think Tyson has that. Absolutely, I'm concerned he could lose. If he doesn't make any adjustments, it could be.
And if he does lose, do we get the Joshua versus Fury fight then? Because you could still sell it.
You could still sell that fight. Because both Oleksandr Usyk and Tyson Fury have a two-way rematch clause that either man can activate if they lose, Fury has that option, though I have a sneaking suspicion that if Usyk pulls this off, Fury might not exercise that rematch clause. He might not activate it. He might decide, off his first professional loss, it's time to sail off into the sunset, or maybe have a rematch with Francis Ngannou. Personally, I don't think Fury could ever live it down if Anthony Joshua were to beat him, if Anthony Joshua were to stop him. And Anthony stopping Fury is a palpable possibility because a goddamn debutante knocked you down. So what do you think Anthony might do to you? Some are still holding out hope that Tyson Fury can turn things around in the Usyk fight the way he did in the second Wilder fight. After having looked horrible with Otto Wallin, he turned things around with Wilder. Can he turn things around with Usyk? And I don't think that's what's about to happen. I think he's going to look slow, clumsy, ineffective against Oleksandr Usyk, and I think he's going to lose. That's why his father's so concerned.
He's getting his excuses in order now, all this stuff about the camp.
I wrestle with the idea that Tyson Fury sticks around the sport of boxing to fight serious boxers in real fights and not circus fights. I wrestle with that idea because I think he's going to lose to Oleksandr Usyk, and I'm not even sure he will activate his immediate rematch clause. He might not want to run it back with that guy depending how the first fight goes, and if he doesn't, I don't think he could psychologically handle a loss to his domestic rival in Anthony Joshua.
Thus, Eddie Hearn may never get his wish of making the Joshua versus Fury fight.
Yet another fight that we may never get to see, the Deontay Wilder fight. Deontay Wilder, who says, I've got to find my killer instincts back. I am too at peace.
It could be that.
Or it could be that as soon as you stepped up in class, all of your technical deficiencies came back to haunt you, and you weren't the devastating puncher people thought you were, because you landed your best shot. You landed the big right hand on Tyson Fury, but you couldn't keep him down, and you couldn't get him out. That was the beginning of the end for the Bronze Bomber, and the Joseph Parker fight is just the latest chapter in the same book. Wilder's hesitancy led to a lopsided loss. Despite being viewed as a gigantic favorite, now Wilder has some soul-searching to do. The buoyant attitude and pleasant demeanor have to come to an end. From the former champ's point of view, he's become entirely too kind nowadays. If he wants to get back to having cataclysmic results, Wilder believes he needs to get rid of his new perky persona. I've got to find my killer instincts back, Wilder told 78 Sports TV during a recent interview. I am too at peace. I'm too happy. When I had the dog in me, nobody had a chance. I've never thought Wilder would beat Anthony Joshua. I never thought that. Big part of the reason is that Wilder was rocked and floored by a lowly journeyman, a
short, fat guy in Harold Sconeers, and that was towards the beginning of his career.
In the middle and towards the end, what you started to notice is that Deontay Wilder loses several rounds in the early goings of a fight. And while he's losing those rounds, he's getting touched up, he's getting hit. I saw him get rocked by Eric Molina, a common opponent between him and Anthony Joshua, and needless to say, Eric Molina, the drummer boy, he's no Anthony Joshua. So if you let yourself get touched by guys like Eric and guys like Artur Spilka, guys like Gerald Washington, regularly landing jabs on you, what happens when a bigger, better fighter and a bigger, better puncher lands jabs on you? You know what he does? He brings over the right.
Wilder's fragile.
I've always thought, this guy's got a chin like fine china. Because if it were Anthony that got dropped by a guy like Harold Sconeers, they'd never let him hear the end of it. But it wasn't Anthony. It was Wilder. And it got buried under the rug, swept under the rug to maintain this illusion that he's one of the sport's most dangerous and devastating punchers. But who did he devastate? Who did he knock out?
Over 40 fights, and his most significant win seems to be Luis Ortiz.
It's the only guy anybody mentions, even Wilder's biggest supporters, even his biggest fans. But Luis Ortiz got beat by Andy Ruiz, and Andy Ruiz got beat by Joseph Parker.
Ortiz got beat by Ruiz, and Ruiz got beat by Parker and Anthony.
Wilder never beat any of them. To offset that, he never beat Ruiz, he never fought Joshua. Think about a fight between Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. What could have been. And all I see is a situation to where this guy might not even get to throw that right hand because he's going to be eating so many jabs. Like he did in the Gerald Washington fight, except these ain't jabs from Gerald Washington. This is a better, more educated jab with more power on it that is more damaging. That if it's Anthony jabbing at you, you don't get to throw to right.
Of course, he's gonna throw his. When he does, you go out. You hit the deck.
Like you did with Harold Sconiers, like you did in more recent years with Tyson Fury. And no, I don't think Tyson Fury is the puncher that Anthony Joshua is. The Otto Wallin fight is a testament to that where Otto Wallin was able to take your best and go the distance, he couldn't make it to the midway point with Anthony Joshua. Anthony, who they said was finished. Anthony, who they like to say is gun-shy.
He's a stronger puncher than Fury. He was always a stronger puncher than Fury. It took Fury a lot of rounds and a lot of punches to finally get Deontay Wilder down. I think Anthony would do it in less time.
I've always favored Anthony to beat Deontay Wilder for that reason. Not just because he's a hard puncher, but because he's more fundamentally sound. He's the power with the skill, whereas Deontay is little more than smoke and mirrors. Now at 38 years old, he means to get his killer instincts back. He's not going to. I mean, I thought that's what him and his old buddy Malik Scotch were working on. He's had Malik in his corner for what? 2 years now.
Posting training footage to his Instagram and all of that. Big talk. That's all fighters like Wilder are good for. Big talk, and it fools a lot of people, but it never fooled me.
I always thought Anthony would beat this guy because he's a hype job, because he's a clown, a protected fighter who, as soon as they let some other kid from some other side of the street hop over the fence, Deontay was exposed. And he's never been the same since. Now he says he wants to get his killer instincts back, and how does he mean to do that? By taking more psychedelics, taking more hallucinogens, more drugs? This isn't the first time that he's fumbled the Joshua fight, the Joshua bag, I should say, as that's the biggest fight for him. I wonder what the Saudis mean to do now, because it was rumored that Deontay has something like 1 or 2 more fights with them, but the Joshua fight's dead. It's not now what it once was, and even if there was a ray of hope to do it, all of that shattered when you went 12 rounds against Joseph Parker and didn't land a meaningful punch, didn't land your big right hand. All you did was move around from one end of the ring to the other, getting outworked and getting bullied.
So what's the expectation? That they're now supposed to stop everything they're doing for you? You lost.
You're a gimmick, and you were always a gimmick. It just took a while for people to finally realize that.